today's webinar called Design 2021 to Delight, presented by Inside View. My name is Mishka Balsam, and I will be your moderator for the next hour. Throughout this year, organizations had to stop in their tracks and hit the reset button, may it be on their strategies, on their budgets, or projections for 2020. Employees had to realign their teams and redesign their operational structure. And above all, the customer interaction and experience changed dramatically. We are just 3 weeks away from calling in a new year, and it is a critical time for all of us to take a look forward, look at 2021, and as Inside View states, what are we doing to ignite leaders, excite employees, and delight customers? We're fortunate to have with us this morning the Inside View's Chief Experience Officer, Crystal Dacuna, an award-winning customer experience professional, international keynote speaker, entrepreneur, and not to forget, a very, very proud football mom. Crystal worked her way up from an entry-level position to earn her seat at the C-suite table. She's a certified leadership coach and a certified professional speaker, a designation held by less than 12% of professional speakers. Crystal attended York University and Brock University and is part of John Maxwell's leadership team. She has been trained by Tony Robbins and the Ritz-Carlton and is a Disney Institute graduate. Crystal contributes to her industry and her community by serving on numerous boards and organizations. Crystal, we're so glad that you're leading today's webinar. And for all of you attending, thank you for being with us this morning. We would like this session to be a very interactive session, so please utilize the Zoom functions that are available to you. If you have questions, you have the option of utilizing the chat function, which you normally find at the bottom of your screen, or otherwise just unmute yourself and ask your questions, or let us know via chat that you want to ask a question, and we'll make sure to include you in this interactive dialogue. And on that note, Crystal, over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that kind introduction, Mishka. Welcome, my friends. I'm so excited to see you all. Thank you so much for taking this hour out of your day. And so today we're really going to focus on sharing ways that we can ignite our leaders, excite our employees, and delight our customers, and giving you some really tangible tools and techniques that can really transform our 2021. Hey, we know we've all had a really challenging time this year. And so we got to press that reset button and start fresh, right? It's also an opportunity for those businesses who are well established and have been around a long time. We've seen this change that we've all had to go through. And so it's really a nice opportunity for us to be able to press the reset button, start fresh, and implement some of these strategies within our businesses that we've always wanted to do, but perhaps have never really had time to do because we're always working in the business and not necessarily on the business. And so what I'm going to share with you today is our signature approach to really up-leveling your business in 2021. We've had the pleasure of doing it with our organization as well as others. So super excited to share it with you today. Now, go ahead and let's use the chat function as much as possible today. You know, I'm an interactive speaker. For those of you who have seen me speak live before, you know, this is a whole new world for us, virtual speaking. And so what I'd love to know from you, go ahead and tell us in the chat, you know, has your organization ever dove into strategic planning or strategic goal setting for the year? And if you have, then you know kind of that approach. Go ahead and let us know in the chat. And I am paying attention to the chat, my friends. So if you've dived into that strategic planning, that goal setting for the year, typically that process starts in October and November. And it's a very systematic approach that we're used to, right? We take a look at the SWOT analysis, we pick a couple of our big goals, and we execute it. And so strategic planning is fantastic. It's a really foundational element of business. But as we move into 2021, those strategic plans that we've done for years, those 3-year, 5-year plans, it's time to kind of change up the game a little bit, my friends. It's time to start fresh and really kind of toss that to the side and take a 21st century approach. And so you've heard that 9 out of 10 organizations typically fail in implementing their strategic plan. A couple of the reasons for that is perhaps it's poor research in the beginning, right? So are we getting to the right people? Are we involving the right people to really be a part of that strategic planning process? Often it's the people around the boardroom table and perhaps the people in the organization, but maybe not so much the customers or the employees really involved in that strategic planning process. So we've seen it time and time again. Also, you know, tracking the right elements. So often we're tracking those bottom line numbers, which are important, but are we tracking things like employee engagement? Are we tracking things like customer satisfaction, customer retention? Are we tracking things like loyalty and employee retention? These are all things that highly contribute to the bottom line. And all too often we see when we're talking about strategic planning, organizations are just focusing on that bottom line. And so, we can't do that anymore, right? We have to be able to look at different numbers because they're all contributing to our overall customer satisfaction. The other thing is, not focused on that emotional intelligence. You guys have heard this. It's a bit of a buzzword right now, but it is so important. It's one of the foundation principles that we've really built the Inside View on, is focusing on that human behavior. So we can understand kind of the emotions behind your employees, as well as the emotions behind your customers. I mean, you all know that in the last few months, we've all been on a bit of a roller coaster. Would you guys agree? Give me a hands up. I can see some of you. Give me a hands up if you'd agree with me. We've all been on a bit of a roller coaster, right, when it comes to emotions. And so it's really changing the game, because we have to understand each other, because we're now looking at each other on a Zoom, on a webinar. I'm talking to a camera and I see about 10 of you guys, but to be able to feel the energy that you're giving me and I'm giving you, it's through our body language, right? And it's through our tone of voice that we're able to do that. So it's really important to be able to connect with your team as well as your customers by focusing on that emotional intelligence. We'll talk a little bit more about it throughout the presentation. But when it comes to strategic planning, this is often a misaligned piece, where it's so logical and so tactical that it's very little emotional. Would you guys agree with me? Go ahead and let me know in the chat if you'd agree, if you've dived into a strategic planning process before. And so what we've done at the Inside View is we've really taken a bit of a 21st century approach to what we love of strategic planning, but we've modernized it quite a bit to be able to get in touch with that emotional experience. So, step one is really anticipating and understanding what our industry will look like 10 years from now, which is kind of crazy, right? To think about 10 years ago, did we think we'd be here, right? Did we think we'd be doing it like this? I don't know. I mean, I thought this was like a, one of those things we'd see in the Jetsons. I didn't think I'd really be talking to a camera like this so quickly, right? So the world has changed so drastically that I think we need to be able to even just take the time to get creative. And I'll dive a little bit more into it as well. But, let's have that big picture, that big scope of what our industry specifically would look like 10 years from now. We also want to dive into that strategic doing as opposed to just planning. I'm a big component of, it's one thing to plan, it's another thing to actually do, right? And so that strategic doing, but combined with the employee, customer, or client journey mapping. And so for those of you that know me, I talk about journey mapping a lot because I'm a little obsessed with it. I see some CX professionals on the line here, and y'all know exactly what I'm talking about when it comes to customer journey mapping. And your customer is different, my friends, right? Sometimes your customer is always your employee first, right? And then your second customer would be the customer that walks through the door or that's doing business with you online or what have you. In a lot of not-for-profits that we work with, the customer might be the donor, right? And so depending on your industry, depending on what you call your customer, it might be a guest, it might be a partner. At the end of the day, it's understanding that emotional journey. I think one of the things we're going to focus on today is understanding your employee journey, your employee experience as they're kind of diving through. And then step 3 is really about that operational planning and goal setting, but from a strategic approach, so that you're holding yourself accountable. You're not spending 2 days at a retreat finding out your strategic plan, because anybody here spent 2 days in a retreat with a strategic plan before? I know you know what I'm talking about. And if you have, go ahead and let me know. 2 days in a retreat, and then it lasts for those first 3 months. And then when you're in, month 11, we're just not doing it. We have or have not executed exactly what we're looking for. So my friends, I feel your pain. I know what you've gone through. I've been there. And so it's really about understanding how to action these things, because in order to create real change, we need to create human behavioral change. We need to understand what's missing, right? So let's dive into those 3 steps a little bit more. So step 1 is anticipate and understand. And so this is where I talked a little bit about kind of having that forward thinking. What does 10 years from now look like? But I really suggest, as you're planning your 2021, I hope you guys are taking notes here, but as you're planning your 2021, my friends, I really want you to take the next 30 to 60 days, put it in your calendar, put some time in your calendar to allow yourself and your team to be creative. Like literally block it in your calendar. Like, you know what, we're going to spend these 2 hours to really just think, like just have fun. Remember how we used to do in school where we would draw a big bubble and then brainstorm? That's what I want you to do. I want you to take some time to think about what your industry is going to look like. And if you don't know, like think of the, you know, if the world was your oyster, what would it, what could it or would it look like? So I want you to have those conversations with your team and yourself, depending on the size of your organization. But I think it's important to really, you know, block that time off, because would you guys agree with me that we don't take the time to do that, right? We're so busy working in our business that we don't allow ourselves the time to be creative. And it's such an important element of emotional intelligence. So brainstorm with your team. The other thing is gather feedback. So, you know, surveys are fantastic. We're going to do a survey with you today at the end of a session. Surveys are really great. But there's so many fantastic other ways we can gather feedback. You know, for those of you that are fun with social media, just if you're, I mean, it's as simple as putting up a post on your LinkedIn or your Instagram saying, hey guys, I really need your feedback, right? We're creating some new products and services and we would love your feedback. It's a simple question. Using focus groups, we do a lot of focus groups for organizations, and allows your customers or your employees, depending on who you're doing the focus group from, it really allows them to give their opinion wholeheartedly because they're engaged wholeheartedly, right? And they know that it's a confidential environment, and so they feel comfortable doing it. Be curious. I say approach questions with childlike curiosity, right? We were a kid. Who's got kids here? I'm sure a lot of you have kids. I mean, the questions are nonstop, right? Why can't we go outside? Why can't we go to the mall? Why can't we go anywhere? And so you want to be able to approach your business and that creative approach with really that childlike curiosity. Research the future. And when I say we research the future, it's really also about researching other industries. You know, you think of companies like Starbucks or Disney, and you know why they've done it so well is it's not because they have huge budgets, guys. It's not. It's because if money or time is no problem, they're thinking about the customer's experience. They're also taking inspiration from other industries. Starbucks takes a huge chunk of their inspiration from the hotel industry, right? And so when I was with a home builder, we took a huge chunk of my inspiration came from the hospitality industry and even the online shopping experience, right? So learn from other industries and take the best practices that you can really, you know, the times you've had really great experiences, whether it's online shopping or, well, that's about all we're doing these days. So, you know, if that's the case, those times where they've made it easy to, you know, give you their money and they've made it an easy experience for you outside of Amazon, as much as we all love Amazon, there's other fantastic organizations out there doing some really great things. And so you want to be able to learn from those industries. I also love this whole idea of having a truck driver vision. This was shared with me with a close colleague of mine. And she said, you know what, when you're driving a truck, how far ahead are you looking, right? When you're driving your car, you're probably looking at that first 200 meters. Would you guys agree? Right? When you're driving your car, you're looking kind of, but when you're driving a truck, like, can you just imagine how far you need to anticipate, right? You got to anticipate the weather. You have to anticipate the bridges. You have to anticipate, you know, where you can fit and where you can't. And there's so much more that we have to anticipate when we're driving a truck, right? And I mean, I haven't driven a truck yet, but maybe. And so the whole idea though is to really understand what's around the corner for us, right? We're getting out of this pandemic hopefully soon. And so while we're here, what is around the corner? What does around the bend look like? What bridges do we need to go under? And where do we kind of need to fit? So I think it's really about seeing things, not just in the, hey, what does the first quarter of 2021 look like, but trying to get ahead of that. Step 2 dives into strategic doing with a CX twist. So CX is customer experience, my friends. That is my like baby. I absolutely love the world of customer experience. And before I dive into this, I want to share with you, and go ahead and tell me in the chat if you think you know, but I'm going to share it with you. The difference between customer experience and customer service. So those of you who've heard me before, and I know there's a couple of you on here, go ahead and tell me in the chat the difference between customer service and customer experience. And guess what? There is a difference. There is absolutely a difference between the two. And so customer service is really that, that process that happens when you have to return something. You go and you look for the customer service counter, or online, right? When you have to take your car, you go take it to get service. It's that transactional service that typically is happening pre or post sale, but it's very transactional. Customer experience, my friends, is something so different because it's not necessarily something that is a process attached to it, but it's very much about how the customer feels when they're doing business with your product or your service or your brand. But I want you to remember that your first customer is your employee and your team members. And so, and perhaps your business partners, perhaps if you're a solo entrepreneur, it might be your vendors or your property manager or right? All those other partners are your first customers, because without them and without the partnership of them, to be able to have successful customer experiences gets even more challenging, right? And so in the 21st century, we really got to be able to, as we're moving into the 21st century, and even into 2021, we got to think of other ways that we can strengthen relationships, and perhaps it's with our partners and our team. So with the CX twist, when I talk about strategic doing with the CX twist, it's keeping what's true. A solid foundation of strategic planning is really important. But what we want to be able to do in a strategic planning session is, that organizational vision, mission, direction. And those are core beliefs that you guys know, you guys understand. But what I want you to do is kind of think about in this strategic planning session, when we do it with organizations, we don't just talk about your vision and your mission, your culture and your core values. What we do is we start to say, okay, I see a couple of people in here, I see Artie and Listra and Noah. We take a look at our organization, Francis and Laura, and we say, hey, how can we action our mission and our vision every single day? So it's not just hanging on the wall of our office where there's nobody in our offices right now, right? And so we want to be able to say, okay, what are we going to do as an organization to practice this vision, mission, core values, or culture, our belief system every single day? And there's quite a lot of ways we can do that, but that's one of the conversations you want to have in a strategic planning session. So it's not just, that thing on the wall. It's like, okay, we're actually actioning it. You also want to, this is the twist part, we want to be able to identify our ideal persona. So again, your ideal employee or your ideal customer, depending on the types of challenges that your organization is going through right now. So I've done this right now. Recently, we're working with a client who about a year ago, we started designing their ideal customer persona in terms of their employee. Now we're actually helping them search for that ideal customer persona from an employee's perspective. And it's fantastic because we did the legwork. We know where they were 6 months before they joined the team. We knew where they were now and what stage of the business at. So now when we're approaching them, it's not even an approach, it's more like a law of attraction. They're almost coming to us because we've designed it that way. So that ideal candidate and that top talent is coming to us. So whether it's your customer or your employee, but identifying that ideal persona is so, so critical. We also want to identify your immediate priorities and your intermediate priorities, right? We know, I mean, my gosh, my friends, there are so many priorities every day. Go ahead and tell me how many things you have on your to-do list today. I kind of gave up on doing a to-do list. I don't know, anybody with me, right? Because there's so many things, right? So now I have a little piece of paper that I fold on my desk. I divide it into 3. And on each side of those 3 things, I write down one thing and I turn it over when I accomplish it. Because the reality is, and you can ask some of my team who are on the call today, I usually only get 3 things done a day. Like, that's the reality. I get about 100 more other things done that are not on my list. And I'm sure you can agree with me. I see Laura laughing. I see Lester shaking her head. That's the reality, is that there's tons of stuff we want to get done, but we really only get those 3 things done. So I think it's important to identify as an organization, no matter how big or how small you are. It doesn't matter if you're a 1-person team or a 100-people team, my friends. Those immediate priorities, those intermediate priorities, and then those long-term goals. Now, the thing with long-term goals in the world that we're living in, I think long-term is like 6 months right now, right? Because I don't know how far we want to think of long-term. And so depending on the organization you're at and depending on the level of business you're doing right now, I think it's important to kind of identify what long-term looks like for you, but it is important. And then key performance indicators. Anybody that knows me knows I love sales. I think that sales is like improving people's life with the product or service that we sell. And so it's identifying those key performance indicators. It's measuring the numbers that are important, not only to sales, but also to a cultural perspective, right? To measuring things that, whether it's employee satisfaction, if your employees are miserable, you're going to have some sales problems. You're going to have like non-negotiable, right? It's going to happen. So it's identifying what are your key performance indicators. And then as a team, participants really want to start to determine those top 5 big, hairy, audacious goals, those big picture goals, and kind of put some timelines to them. So that's really part 1 of the step 2. The second part of step 2 is that strategic doing with the CX twist. And so the CX twist is really including a tool that we use in the design thinking world. So my world is customer experience, and we use a lot of different tools. And one of the big ones is design thinking. And so design thinking is really, this practice of not looking for ways to solve problems, but looking for ways to really create solutions for things that maybe you haven't had a problem with yet. Right. And so using journey mapping, which is one of the design thinking tools that we use, you're able to really identify what that employee experience, what that customer experience, what that donor experience might look like. So in this little picture here, you can see the yellow. That's what the experience is like. So the journey that they go on. And then we start to map out, there's many different ways we do it, but we map out the people, the processes, the emotions along the way. I'll share a couple more images with you in a bit. But it's really identifying those moments of truth where we need to address the journey. We need to say, hey, right here, this is the most exciting part of this journey. But they would, if we analyze it and we get this visual, they're not happy here. They have so many questions. We haven't answered so many questions for them. They actually might be frustrated. For us, we're like excited because that's the best part of the journey. But when you think of it, there's a couple things along the way that have probably created some frustration, animosity, anxiety. I mean, there's all sorts of things. And so we want to be able to kind of identify that. We also want to create an action plan moving forward that'll really attract that ideal customer. So now that you can get ahead of that customer's expectations, we can start to attract them in the right way. So how do you do that? Well, you start designing your ideal persona. And so when it comes to, again, for everything, I keep saying the word customer, but I want you to keep in mind that your number one customer is your employee, right? And so this would go for both facets. So identifying what that persona is, and we get super, super, super clear on the persona, meaning, who are they? What brands do they like? What's important to them? Here's a couple of examples of a few personas that we've done for some organizations. But, the brands that people choose, if they're choosing, Samsung versus Apple, it tells you a lot about the customer's expectation of level of service. If they're choosing Lexus versus Acura or BMW, believe it or not, there's little nuances that really tell you about that customer's expectation, right? So understanding kind of what's important to them and getting really clear on their pain points, as well as, how they like to do business. The other part of identifying the ideal customer persona is probably one of my favorite, is understanding diversity and inclusion. And so diversity and inclusion, especially here in Niagara, I think it's a great way for us to start increasing market share and really being available to different segments of the market. And really, here's 3 reasons that diversity, inclusion, having a good understanding of that really helps you to up-level your sales, up-level your business for 2021. But how this entwines with the customer journey is that when you're able to map out that journey, you're able to identify where, hey, how would somebody with a disability, maybe use our product or service? Hey, we mapped out what our typical customer is like, but maybe somebody with a disability, how would they like that? Or are they even going to see it? Are they even going to find us? How would somebody of a different nationality or of a different sexual orientation, or how would that person find and use our product or service? And so a couple of stats that, I pulled: 70% of diverse organizations are better positioned to capture new markets. If your organization is diverse, you're going to get diverse perspectives, and that allows you to really capture new markets. 15 times more revenue and sales is seen by companies with high racial diversity. Guys, it doesn't matter how small your organization is. If your organization has 3 people in it, or if you're a solopreneur, open it up. The world is our playground now, right? We've got social media. You need to ask feedback from diverse perspectives to be able to gain that information. You don't have to, restructure your whole organization and feel guilty that you don't have diverse people in your organization. It's okay. You just have to ask people for their input, to be able to include that information and use it to benefit your business and to benefit the customer's experience. 87% of diverse teams are better decision makers than individuals. Doesn't that make sense? Right? Like a team that's coming from diverse perspectives, again, abilities, disabilities, genders, religions, political views, a team that's coming to a problem or a solution or a product or a service from diverse perspectives allows you to make better decisions because you're making decisions that affect everybody. So we all want to be the product or service for everybody, but typically we have a niche market, right? We have a product or service that touches on one particular type of ideal persona. I have it for my business. You probably have it for yours, but you want to be able to see how other businesses view it. So I'll just share a little bit more about the customer journey. So this is an organization that we worked with in the medical industry. And so the nice thing with this is, so if you take a look at the green here, this is the actual customer journey. So this is an employee journey, actually. And what we did was we spent quite a bit of time really getting this journey right. But in getting that journey right, we did focus groups, we did surveys, we surveyed the customers, we surveyed the employees. We really gathered data so that this journey is as close to factual as possible. We might have made up a couple of little, things to go to a restaurant here and there, but it is almost 99% fact. And so it's not a guess, it's not a hypothesis. We really get clear on what that employee journey looks like. Then we start to identify, the pink is the people and the blue is the processes. And so it's on stage and off stage. So the people and processes that the customer can see, as well as the people and processes that they can't see. So the most important part of this journey map, though, is these yellow sticky notes. And for anybody that knows me knows I love sticky notes. I definitely have an obsession with sticky notes. This is why. And so the yellow sticky notes is how the person feels, right? Are they frustrated? Are they excited? Are they happy? Are they sad? Are they confused? Are they anxious? Like, how are they feeling at each stage of the journey? Has nothing to do with your business, but has everything to do with the experience that they're getting, right? It's not about how we feel. It's about how they feel, right? So it's really getting clear on that emotional experience. And then what you did, you kind of see in the picture here, there's a couple of green dots, a couple of red dots. And so those red dots, for instance, those red dots, you start to be able to see that that's the moment of truth. Right there is that moment of truth where that customer may not be happy and we're trying to create a great experience for them. And so when you can identify that moment of truth, you can really start to be able to identify how you want to shift your business, your product, your service, or identify that, hey, this might not be our ideal customer, right? Like we can start to identify that based on moments of truth, because moments of truth are that when your emotions are heightened, whether it's positive or whether it's negative. We were working with one organization and they were about to remove a couple of letters that went out to their customers. They said, you know what, maybe we'll just email them now. And so they started emailing them for about a year. And then we journey mapped and we identified that people didn't want that important letter. That letter was going to help them make sure that their house was maintained, because it was for a new home organization. That missing that letter in the mail is detrimental in the long term because the house wasn't going to get service because it's just another email, right? So we're trying to make processes easier for us in a business, but if we look at it from the customer's perspective, they want that letter in the mail, right? They wanted that hardcore letter in the mail, and that's what really allowed them to be able to really shift their customer experience, because they were noticing a lot more service calls. They were noticing that there was a lot of, people weren't doing the maintenance on the house that they needed to be doing in the summer and the spring and the winter and the fall. And so without those hard letters in the mail, it wasn't a reminder for them. So you can start to identify those moments of truth when you start to really map out the journey. I know I typically get a lot of questions about this. So go ahead, and if you do have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat and I'll get to them near the end. Here's an online shopping experience that we did, really being able to map out that customer journey again. So the idea is the same. We're just using different tools depending on the type of organization. But, it's the feelings. It's this part right here. It's when we think things should be great all the way through. When you start to really identify, you notice, wait a minute, why are they frustrated here? This is where they're paying us. They should be happy to give us their money. Like, how the heck does Disney do it, right? We go to Disney, we spend thousands and thousands of dollars on princesses and Mickey Mouse, and we're happy about it. Like, go figure, right? We come back and we're broke, but we're happy because we're at the happiest place on earth. And so when somebody's purchasing something, the last thing we want them to do is be frustrated or sad, right? We want them to be in a place of joy. So that's what's going to make that a magic moment for them. I feel like I've got some good questions coming my way. I can't wait to get to them. So let me keep going here. So step number, this should be step number 3. My apologies, my friends. But goal and operation planning. And so with goal and operation planning, it's pretty simple stuff here, guys. It's about taking the information from the journey map and that strategic planning session and making a report card for yourself. And so what we do with organizations is we start to hold them accountable. So we meet with them every quarter, actually, and we hold them accountable to be able to, move the dime forward on their report card, so to speak. So we have some coaching sessions and conversations with them, but it's really identifying the plan moving forward. Who's in charge, who's championing this. And if you're a solo or an entrepreneur, or you have a very small team, you can't do everything. Just letting you know, right? You can't do everything. You need to be able to get some partners. You need to be able to get some people to help. And so it's really identifying who those champions are that are going to help you move the dime forward. And so what you want to do is you want to create a real action plan moving forward that's going to attract and retain your ideal customer and your ideal employee, your ideal donor, your ideal guest, whoever that might be. So I see some questions, Mishka. Should we go to a couple questions before we move forward?
I think so, because I think the questions are quite timely. And I thought if we start out with Renee's, and Renee's asking, can you give us some concrete example of that moment of truth that you kind of refer to? And I think that's an excellent question, because I think we all are looking for it, and we often probably miss it too at the same time. So back to you, that if you can expand on that moment of truth.
And Renee, what type of business are you in? If you're able to unmute yourself or just let me know. What type of business are you in, Renee? Is she around? All right, so I'll just keep going. So moments of truth, there's so many examples I could tell you. The one I think of right away is Vistaprint. So if anybody's ever shopped on Vistaprint, they're very, very conscious and intentional about their journey that they design with a customer. And so what they started to do is, you go on Vistaprint, you might have purchased, you might be purchasing flyers or brochures or something of that nature. Well, before you check out, and go ahead and tell me in the chat if you know what I'm talking about, but before that person checks out, they take that same logo and they put it on 10 other things that might be relevant to you. Right. So it's that moment of truth when a buyer is in that buying experience. They're in that they're open to purchasing. They're about to press the checkout button. And all of a sudden, I give them things that might impact their experience. Perhaps if they're ordering business cards, well, if they're ordering business cards, they might need pens, right? They might be starting a new business. And so they might need some stationery. Or if you're ordering a t-shirt, well, you might need a hat to go with it. And so they start to really put your logo on everything. And then you actually, I think there's statistics around people stay in their shopping cart like 12 minutes longer on average because of that. Like, it's crazy. Like, it's rare to even get people to stay on a website for 12 minutes. Like, it's crazy when you look at the numbers. So I think it's really important to kind of understand that. I see Renee here is Safari Niagara. Oh, awesome. I love my Safari Niagara team. So Safari Niagara, for you guys, a moment of truth might be, and I was actually just there the other day. And so, when you walk in, the sights, the sounds, the smells are so important, right? You're creating a Christmas experience right now for people. And that moment of truth is when that person opens that front door, they should be smelling Christmas. They should be hearing Christmas, right? And so it's creating an emotional experience is really about hitting all the senses, your sense of sight, your sense of sound, your sense of smell, taste, touch, all of that. And so I think, that's it, Renee, is walking through that front door like your customer, right? That's a moment of truth that we identify in the customer journey is, hey, right here, when they walk through that door, in your case, or maybe it's online or wherever it is, but right away, what's the experience and what's the expectation, right? So again, I'm using Disney just because everybody's familiar with it. But when you walk through those gates, it's magical. It starts right from the beginning. And so it sets a level of expectation. Anything less than that, you're not satisfied with. Anything less than magical, you're not satisfied with. And I think it's important because a lot of organizations, they don't set their bar high enough. right? I mean, tell me if you guys would agree. Like, well, it's good. It's good enough, right? It's good enough. But really, I want you to stretch yourself. And that's why I said in the beginning, give yourself time to be creative. If money or time was no object, what would you do? How would you create a magical moment? Chances are 9 times out of 10, whatever idea you want to do actually costs no money or time. It's just about, really taking the time to kind of figure it out and understand. I hope that answers your question, Renee.
Actually, I think, Crystal, you're excellent actually on it, because when you were talking about the experience, I thought even on this hour-long webinar, for all of you attending, Crystal was the one who actually chose the music, the first like 2-3 minutes as you were entering actually the webinar. And I thought it set the tone. Like here, it's something very simple, but it set the tone. It's the graphics we're using, the font we're using, the voice that we're using when we're talking to people. It's all these other facets that I think are critical. And for us to stop in our tracks and think, just because we did it last year, we've always done it like this, maybe there's an opportunity actually to revisit it. And especially as customer experience is significantly changing this year, there's probably no better time on that. Michelle has brought forward a really great question here as well. And the question is, what virtual platforms do you recommend to journey mapping in a remote and distant way? And I think this is really a critical question, because so many people are asking that. So how do I best move forward in it? And what technology can I use to actually support it?
Yeah, there's a few different technologies. I'm assuming, Michelle, do you have experience in journey mapping? Are you familiar? Go ahead and tell me in the chat if you're a CX professional. It sounds like a CX professional type of question. But there's tons of different softwares that we use. One is Minto. It's a really great one. Strativity is another great one. Minto's been kind of my one of choice right now. Yeah, Minto and Strativity would probably be the top two that I'd recommend. Strativity is very, it can get pricey, but it's beautiful because Strativity allows you to really be able to, you can put we do a lot of video mystery shopping and online mystery shopping and real mystery shopping with our customers. And so we're able to actually take some of that video and some of the chat conversations that happen in mystery shopping and put it right into that customer journey. So that's kind of a cool one. Michelle, many years ago, I led CX private well. There you go, Michelle. I knew it. See, I knew it. That's definitely a CX question. So thank you for that. I hope that helps. But for a company like BMO, a larger company like that, Strativity would definitely be kind of the way I would go. Qualtrics also has some really great platforms that they use, but that's for a really large organization. For the smaller businesses, we like Minto. That's what we use when we're doing it for companies.
Crystal, there's a quick follow-up question on this one. You mentioned a second platform, and some of our participants today weren't able to hear what the second platform is that you utilize.
So there's Minto and there's Strativity. Strativity would be if you're a large organization, that would be a better one for you. Minto would be what we use when we're with clients. So if it's something you're interested in, connect with us. We might be able to hook you up a little bit, but that's the one we like to use. So.
And I have to say that this is really an important issue. There was a recent study that came out by McKinsey & Company, and they surveyed companies with the goal to identify some of the large-scale changes anticipated in those organizations. And the third top issue that was identified was actually the use of technology and systems. So not just in the planning, but even the way we interact with our customers, in the way we interact with our employees at the same time, was one of the top 3 changes I think that organizations are going through. And it's a really interesting one.
Yeah, organizations are investing in it just to inspire. And this is where I started the session as an organization, the Inside View. We've really focused on, our methodology, igniting leaders, exciting employees, and delighting customers. Because what happens more often than none is an organization will say, Crystal, I need you to motivate my team. I need you to do a team building session. I need you to help us with our sales. And we can't work on the team unless we start with the leadership, guys. Would you guys agree? Right? That leadership needs to take a step and be involved in that process. So we need to inspire and ignite our leaders to really make sure that they're ready for this, because engaging in a customer experience design process that we work with businesses on is really about you got to be ready for it, because it's going to change you. It's going to shift you. We're shifting human behavior here. And organizations, I think, are ready now that they've seen that, this pandemic can change things in a drastic way. And we need to put our team top of mind. We need to be able to engage with our team in order for our team to take us to places that we can't go on our own. So we need to be able to create those connections with people.
Crystal, we let you go back to your presentation, but I wanted to let every participant also know that links to some of the platforms that I mentioned will include in the follow-up to you as well. So that in addition to getting a full recording of today's webinar, we'll make sure to include some of the links of what is being discussed today as well, to make it easy for you to access it. And back to you, Crystal.
Yeah, so this is a question I wanted to actually pose to the whole group. I think we've got about 24 people on here. And so I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a moment. And I'd love for us to have some conversations. I have a little bit of time for this, but, depending on the organization, I'd love for you to introduce yourself. Tell us the organization that you're at. I know there's definitely people from Niagara, but I see people that are outside of the region as well. Do you believe that making employee experience and customer experience design will really up-level your organization in 2021? It's a bit of a rhetorical question. If you're here, I think you're on that right page. But more importantly is how. How do you think your type of organization and where you are, how do you think paying attention and really, making employee experience and customer experience design a priority for 2021, how do you believe that will up-level your organization? So let me stop sharing my screen here for a moment. So I can see everybody, because I love seeing people. Oh my God, I can see everybody. Hey, Laura. Hey, Michelle. Oh, Michelle, I know you, Michelle. Great to see everyone. Thanks so much for being here, my friends. So if you want to go ahead and put your hands up or just unmute yourself, we'll take a couple of conversation. Not all at once, guys, just one person at a time. Who would like to start us off?
Actually, Crystal, if you're okay, I'm going to bring one question forward that actually had been emailed to us. So it's a person who wasn't able to attend here, but who actually emailed us and asked if we could ask you this particular question. Who should be part of the core planning team if there is a perfect number of people that should be part of it in making, in planning your strategic plan and planning these interactions? Who should be, how many people should be involved in it? And that was one question that has been emailed to us because the person just wasn't able to be here.
Such a great question. I love that question. So, there's a great book out there called Design to Delight by, oh my gosh, I can't remember his name, but it's right behind me. It's Design to Delight. And it talks all about the Mercedes experience and how they design the Mercedes experience to delight customers. No, it's not Designed to Delight, Driven to Delight. And in that book, he talked about everybody from the janitorial staff to the, frontline staff to the accounting department. Everybody was involved in designing what their customer and employee experience is all about. And so with our organizations, we always really encourage that. I know from a logistics standpoint, it can definitely be tricky to get a whole bunch of employees or, the whole team involved. But that's why we do a lot of focus groups with the team. So we are able to kind of get their input to be able to put into a journey map and to put into that strategic planning conversation. And then typically, yes, thank you, Deepta, thank you for putting it in the chat there. Typically what we like to do is once we get and gain that feedback from all levels of the organization and we start to do the journey map, then we take the leaders who would be your leadership team or your C-suite or your executives, we take them out of the picture and we invite the employees to take a look at that journey map. And then sometimes when we have the opportunity, we even invite the customers to come and take a look at the journey map. We might pick top 5, 10 customers that maybe you've lost. And you're like, how the heck did we lose this customer, right? Well, ask them, guys, like, what's the harm in asking them? What made you go to somebody else, right? Or what's making you not choose us right now? You haven't chosen anybody else, but you're not interested in us. Tell us about your journey. What part of the journey was a moment of truth for you? So at first glance, like a part of this 3-step process that I would tell you is that you'd want to involve your leadership team. So that could be anywhere from, your sales, your operations. What we want to avoid is people working in silos, and we want people to work together, because it's always like, well, I'm in charge of sales and I'm in charge of marketing and I'm in charge of operations and I'm in charge of accounting. My friends, we're all in charge of the people. right? Like we're all in charge of that people industry. So it's important for us to get rid of the silos, work together, and give our input together. I hope that answers that question. But if possible, invite those people. Often when I do journey mapping, like the picture that I showed you, we left that journey map up for about a month, and we kept going back to it and get back to it. And so we were able to really identify things. We give you like a report card of what it is and a final kind of analysis of what your customer journey should be in tangible tools. But ultimately, it's really about kind of looking at it, letting it marinate, and letting different people look at it. Because that janitorial staff is going to look at it very different than the CEO. Right. And very different than, the frontline employee or the cashier or the person that's building your back end customer service platform or your website. They're going to look at it completely different than the person that's involved. So I think it's important to involve as many people as you can. Do I talk too much? Sorry, guys.
By Ann Dixon. Anne, thank you for being with us. What do you recommend as the best way of conducting customer feedback after a purchase has taken place? Such a critical point, because when we all look at how many purchases we make and there's no interactions after that, maybe some people ask us for some, check into their website or follow them on social media or other ways, but often there is a break in communication after we've made a purchase. Crystal, what are you?
Yeah. So guys, you probably have all been there where you haven't even purchased yet and they're asking for feedback. Has anybody experienced that? Right? You haven't even clicked the buy button yet and they're asking you for their feedback. That's probably, from a customer experience perspective, one of the most frustrating things. So if you're doing that, please stop. but the surveys, and Anne, I'd love to know what industry you're in, because that'll make a difference. So there's many different ways. My favorite is focus groups. Hands down, bar none, my favorite is focus groups, because you're able to really event catering. So yes, Anne, I would definitely say focus groups, because that's such an emotionally inspired thing, right? The senses are so highly involved in event catering. That I would say for sure focus group. The nice thing about a focus group is that you're going to get more information than you're asking. And when we design the questions in a focus group, they're very deep. They're very open-ended questions that allow people to tell us much more than just a survey, right? It allows us to look at things that the customer might have never have expected, right? So just an example, you walk into a store, and does anybody remember going to Blockbuster back in the day, and we'd walk in and the first thing they'd say is, hi there, hello, hello. Do you remember that? They would say hello like really quick, because that was their job. They had to say hello to you the second you walked in the door. But when that one or two person said, hey, how are you? Welcome. Come on in, guys. We're excited to have you. All of a sudden, it's like, oh, it's a great experience, as opposed to them just saying hi, 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 hi. That kind of information you're going to gain from a focus group, because the customer will tell you, they said hi, but they didn't even care. Right? As opposed to, it's the way you were saying hello. It's like, hey, greetings, welcome, my friends. Like, it's such a different way of saying hello. And you're going to be able to get that type of thing from event catering, from a focus group. When I go to an event and, these big, large scale events that we've all attended in those back in the day, when we all attended those beautiful events in the hotels, during award ceremonies or during special keynote talks, I'd hear people put the plate down. And I don't know if anybody else paid attention to it, but for me, it was always like, all I hear is like the clinging and the clanging of the plates and the clinging and the clanging of the like cutlery. But if that event venue was to really think of the customer experience, they probably would have put down a napkin on the plate so that when they put the plate down, it didn't cling and clang while a keynote speaker is talking, right? It's about all those little, guys, we're designing to delight, and the details matter. Like, the details so matter. And in event catering, you're eating with your eyes first, right? So it's about what color popped, what smell popped, what made that experience important. And you're going to get that from focus groups. Surveys will give you like a quarter of the information. We're going to do a survey with you guys today, and you're going to get a quarter of the information, right? We're going to get a little bit of feedback, and they're great. But yeah, I hope that answers your question. I know I could go on forever. Sorry.
Crystal, there's one quick follow-up question, then we
Sure.
can go back to the rest of your presentation. But Anne is also asking, what you have your questions, do you recommend a personal email, a questionnaire, or a call as a follow-up? And there's a number of ways, directing them to our website. Social media could be a follow-up to.
After a focus group, Anne, or do you have questions? Yeah. Yeah, so after a focus group, I would, again, it depends on how many people we're talking about, Anne. If you're an organization with thousands of people, then I think an email is great. One of the things we did with the focus group was after, if they felt comfortable, because a lot of time focus groups, right, like we really ensure confidentiality. It's highly important. That's why I always recommend a third party to do that for you, because we want to, I mean, nobody's going to give you information if they know that you're watching, right? So they need to be confidential. And then that company, whoever it be, like if it's us doing it, then we have done in the past where we've done a Zoom call at the end to be able to say, hey, we'd love to have you. We'd love to have you join us. We just did a Zoom call at the beginning of the pandemic. I think it was like March or April. We did a Zoom call based on a focus group that we had done. And so what we did was we invited them back. We only got probably about 50% of them come back. But the nice thing is we were able to kind of share how we're moving forward, things that we're actually doing, and then perhaps send a follow-up email. So my recommendation would be to try to engage as much as possible, because guys, how many emails do we have? Right? We've got, even a video email would be great. I love sending video emails. I love using voice notes. You know, in LinkedIn, I use voice notes a lot in LinkedIn messages, and people like go crazy as opposed to doing the typical email. Hey, nice to meet you. I'm looking to grow my network, as opposed to, hey, listen, my name's Crystal. I'd be delighted to meet with you. Are you up to like a quick chat? My world is all about this. I'd love to learn a little bit about your world, but it's a voice note. So all of a sudden they hear my voice, they find out who I am, and it's just a bit more engaging. Cool. But
Crystal, can you go back to your presentation and then take more questions at the end?
Well, yeah, like I would love to know. So from people, like, is there anybody that would love to share with me? How do you think, focusing on employee experience or customer experience could up-level your organization this year? Is there anybody that's not scared to talk? I know some of you, and I know you're not all scared to talk. Before I call on you, you know who you are.
I can share. I'm never scared to talk. I'm Michelle.
I know.
Hi, everyone. Pronouns she, her. So I own a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultancy. And I see such potential around understanding how we can simplify and create greater clarity within organizations on what they can do to build their strategy. So it's one of those things that I think it's a natural that we bring to bear, but we haven't been really intentional about it. So having that forum to just really think about what are the elements that lead to clarity, and to validate that with our customers or not, disprove it, I think will be really, really helpful for us going forward.
Fantastic. Fantastic. I'd love to hear from somebody about employee experience. I know we've got 8 minutes left, but is there anybody that might be able to, think about really kind of journey mapping their employee experience? Arti, Francis, Kennedy, any of you? Are you Leicester? I know Leicester, you've got a smaller team, but definitely experience is a huge part of yours. Arti, I see you unmute yourself. You're going to talk to us. Yay. Tell us.
I just wanted to add that, with regard to the employee experience, I just have one thing, that they need to be valued, right?
Yes.
No matter how amount of efforts, determination, and everything that they bring to the plate, they need to be valued. So I think that's something that would be my input.
Yeah, and that's what we identify in that journey mapping process, is where do they need to feel valued, and where are we valuing them, if at all, right? So often. Anybody else before I continue? All right, let me get back to my screen here. Give me 1 second. Noah, can you give me screen sharing, my friend? Sorry, you disabled me. 1 moment, please. Well, we fixed our technical. There we go.
Crystal,
yes.
While we have a moment, Josie asked an interesting question. Given the significant impact of the pandemic on employees, in particular, layouts, shortened hours, and everything else, what are some of the tips on how we can get employees re-engaged with the organization when employers are bringing them back? And I think it's a really it's a very good question.
I love the question. And that's why I brought this tool, to be honest, is because it's such an important thing that we all need to do, is to be able to value our employees right now, and to be able to understand the emotional impact that they're all going through. My number one thing would be ask, whether you're asking in a conversation, whether you're asking online, whether you're asking in a survey, but you got to ask them, because we're not asking enough on, what that is. That could just be a day off, guys, because, we're working with a large organization that's across Canada right now, and their team has to wear full PPE every day. They're working 12, 14 hours a day. They're still engaged because we're asking, hey, what else can we do? We know you're working 12 hours, but like, what can we do to be able to make this better for you? Because we've hired the right people. So if you've hired the right people that have that same goal focus and that are still customer committed and have that service mindset, then they're going to understand where you're coming from. But when you haven't hired the right people, then it's going to be a little bit more challenging. But you really want to just ask, guys, hey, how can I make this better for you? What can I do to improve this? I know how hard you're working. What can I do to create a better experience for you? And they might just say, nothing. I just needed you to listen, right? I just needed that time. You don't know what they're going to say, right? We worked with one organization, it was last year. This is pre-pandemic. But once we did the focus group and identified some areas, one of the things that we identified was that people were working so hard that they didn't have enough time with their family. And so the feedback was, we would work all day, we would go home, we have to clean, we have to spend one day on cleaning, one day on cooking, and then we don't get any time with our family. So the organization said, okay, it's going to cost us roughly about $2,500 an employee, but can we get their house cleaned once a month? Can we send a cleaner to go clean their house for 3 hours a month? And so they did it, and they worked out a deal with another company. And once a month, every employee got their house cleaned, right? For a couple hours. It was just that little bit of maintenance, but it was 3 hours that somebody was now able to spend with their family, right? So it's really, when we start to do focus groups, we start to ask different questions and being open to different answers. I'm down to 4 minutes, my friends. Let me share this last couple slides with you, and then I will stay and answer any questions you like. So let me get into it right here. So ultimately, the goal at the end of our new process that we recommend to you guys, you're able to gather feedback from 360 degrees. So you're really getting a full scope of what that journey looks like. You're involving the right people, your customer, your team, your stakeholders, your board members, depending on who, what type of organization, but you're involving the right people. Design thinking approach, you're using customer journey mapping, allows you to have a visual as opposed to analytical data. You actually get a visual data and emotionally intelligent approach. And then lastly, that action of accountability allows you 12 months into the process to really be able to see that, hey, we've moved the dime forward. Right? We've taken some changes, because without that action of accountability, you're going to be here next year and doing the same thing, right? And we don't move the dime forward as much as we want to. We want to be able to create that's a huge thing for me and my team, is we want to be able to create an impact going forward. So a year from now, you've made significant customer experience changes within your organization. And so ultimately, the key outcomes that we see when we do this process, we've just started this process in full transparency during the pandemic. And so we've been able to work with a few organizations to really get clear on this. And we're thrilled at the way it's going, because typically we do strategic planning on one side and customer journey mapping on another, right? But now we've been able to really integrate them, because one of those top key priorities always has to do with either a customer or an employee, right? So we've really been able to measure it and see things from a different perspective. But the key outcomes of doing the process this way, clearly, oops, I got some spelling errors in there, but it allows you to identify your future in the industry. And then it also creates some clarity on your strategic vision, direction, and then again, getting clear on your customer journey and then your next steps. So we have a program that we were just launching. It's called Customer Experience Mastery. And so, not everybody's ready for the program, but that program is when you're really ready to kind of create that transformational change in your organization. It's a 12-month program, and it's like high level of accountability for people that are ready. So my approach would be, first, you want to get clear on the journey, get clear on the strategy. Then perhaps when you're ready, dive into a process that really holds you accountable. Whew, I'm done. What do you think? I made it with 2 minutes to spare. Oh, you're on mute, Mishka.
Thank you so very much, Crystal, for actually all that you have shared. We have 2 minutes here, and I wanted to pick up on a question that Kennedy had put forward. They work for a large transportation company and have a well-developed strategic plan that honestly focuses on producing their desired bottom line. However, the sustainability of their industry is based on drivers, retention, the recruitment, as well as bringing in young and bright people into their industry. Would the process of journey mapping help them to connect this to their overall strategic plan? I think it's a great question because it's such a unique industry, such a unique way of looking. These are the people that we need to focus on. Crystal,
absolutely, absolutely. As a a truck driver, and I even use the truck driver analogy because I think it's so important. Guys, they're going through different things than we're going through. They can't find a truck stop to go to the bathroom in because they're all closed with the pandemic. Like, they're experiencing this pandemic from a totally different perspective, Kennedy. And so I think it's really important. Journey mapping that employee experience would be a really great asset for you and your organization, because I think it'll help you to create some real clarity on how they're feeling. Would it involving them in the process? For sure. Maybe it's virtually. We've done virtual journey mapping. And maybe it's not, maybe they're not ready for journey mapping. Maybe it's just focus groups. And we take a couple of moments to say, listen, can you guys carve out, can everybody individually carve out half an hour and just chat with our person to really find out? They're not going to tell an organization, I'll tell you that. They want, confidentiality is huge. So they'll want to be able to give feedback to somebody that they know is not going to be shared back. It's just the way the world works. I'm sure you guys can understand where that's coming from, but really, really important to kind of identify those moments of truth. Is there somewhere we can set up for them to be able to, have those pit stops and have the better experiences? Is it, some of them are sleeping in their trucks. I've seen so much stuff that we need to be able to really get clear on what that looks like. So I don't know if that answers your question, but absolutely, bar none, I would say mapping your employee experience. They're a frontline worker, right? They're I don't know what it's called. What is it? Emergency worker? I can't remember the name, but you know what I'm talking about. So essential worker, that's the word I'm thinking about. And so as an essential worker, it's important that we keep them top priority.
Excellent. We're getting a lot of really nice chats and comments coming back. So maybe because I'm conscious that it's 11 o'clock, we kind of said we would leave it to the hour, but open to any more questions. Are there any questions for you for attending here? Maybe you don't want to use the chat function, just unmute yourself. We have Crystal with us,
I'm welcome to stick around for a couple more minutes. I'd be happy to.
Yeah, to do that as well. Crystal, there are, you mentioned at one point, and this is one question that has been texted to us, where you said that we need to look at our industry, we need to look at what's kind of happening 10 years down the road. Seems to be so difficult to do in these times, very, very hard to do, as we're all rewriting and redesigning our organization, rewriting our plans that we have. Any suggestions on this one of where maybe people should look at to find information of what their industry and how their industry will change?
I think a lot of this, there's definitely lots of information available online. There's AI, there's so much information from a technology perspective online. But like I started today's session off by saying, give yourself time to imagine. You think of Disney and their Imagineers, and they give themselves time to just think of what could be possible. And I think we just don't do that enough. And so, just literally giving yourself that time to close your eyes and imagine, what would it be like? We never thought we'd be living the life of the Jetsons. Like, we just never thought of it. And now here we are, right? And so I think it's really important to kind of give ourselves that time to imagine things differently. For sure, you Google it just for a minute, and there is so much information out there about technology and where industries are heading. People want to, you have to make it easy for customers to do business with you. You have to make it seamless. You have to make sure that you're appreciating and valuing customers, both employees and your customers, but valuing them at a high level of what's important to them. We have to be able to personalize and customize things as much as possible. We have to be able to collaborate with businesses and start to cross-functional, start to make sure that our business is cross-functional. Often people will say, well, they're my competitor. I said, but could you imagine if they were your colleague? right? Could you imagine if they were your colleague? How can you change and shift the way we're thinking so that our competitors become our colleagues, right? And so we're all working together for the same common goal of making sure that our customer is appreciated and valued, our employees are appreciated and valued, and they're given the tools they need to succeed, right? If in the 21st century, you know, technology, who knows what technology is going to look like? And I don't even know that we can think that far ahead, Mishka, but I think giving us the time to be able to do that and get creative, it's probably the biggest thing that we're missing out on. And I'm sure most of you guys would agree. Like, when was the last time you had a let's get creative meeting with your team? Not a sales meeting, not an operations meeting, not a, you know, marketing meeting, but a customer experience meeting. You know, that's probably when in our program, in our CX Mastery program, that's one of the top things I talk about is, you know, the first thing on your agenda is to create a customer experience meeting and an employee experience meeting. Forget the sales meetings, forget the marketing meetings, forget the operations meetings that we're all doing. And we have our customer on our vision statement and our mission statement, but we don't meet about them at all. Right. And so I think it's like, let's be honest with ourselves and really focus on our customer, on what's important.
You know what I'm reminded of, Crystal, is how important it is for us to change our dialogue and our communication, really, because just with what you just said, it's absolutely true. I have an operations meeting today. I'm going to go into it, but it's changing the dialogue to actually, this changing of the dialogue that will create a different outcome. So thank you for sharing that. And on that note, if you're okay, Crystal, I think maybe we should wrap it up.
Yes, absolutely.
Leaving. So to everyone who's still with us right now, I wanted to let you know that today's webinar has been recorded and will be available on our website at dncc.ca, as well as on Inside View's website, which is gettheinsideview.com. It will be emailed to participants as well. And knowing Crystal, it will also be made available through social media as well. So if you follow Crystal on different platforms, it will be made available everywhere. And lastly, to all participants, thank you so very much for joining us. Stay safe and healthy during the season. And Crystal, you are amazing. You're a total inspiration. And I can just see the difference in having you leading this conversation and imagining what difference you will make to all the organizations that you work with directly. So thank you for spending this last hour with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And all the best. And to everyone here, I wish you a wonderful holiday season and a very, very successful 2021.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. Thank you so much.